Hey all you little monsters, this little monster girl Desi, here to read you more of my little stories. Dear Fellow Traveler is a collection of stories varying in characters and settings, all involving the supernatural. Named after the sea wolf song Dear Fellow Traveler, we follow different characters on their journeys or the places they visit. Some are searching, some are discovering, and others are just wanting a place to belong. The world is extremely vast and has many stories to be told. So today I'll be reading Dear Fellow Traveler, Man with Blue Eyes, Part 1. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you guys that I have a Patreon. So if you want to support me, $2 a month will get you early access to all my videos and fanfictions. For $5 a month during your first month, you'll either get the option of having a doodle or me writing you a short fanfiction. You'll also get early access to redraws and work in progresses. And for $15 a month, I'll draw you an icon, and you'll either get the option of having your persona or an OC featured in the background of my videos. But if you can't support me on Patreon, then you can either share this video or check out my other social medias. The little monster community is slowly growing, but I'm excited to see where it will take us in the future. So, with all that said, let's get started. Dear Fellow Traveler, what had I done to get such rotten luck? Was the biggest question on the stranded man's mind as he walked along the forest road. He should have listened to his Mima. Don't take a long trip on the bus alone, she said. Bring Uncle Joe or your brother Jim, she insisted. Heavens to Betsy. Jessie wished she had listened, but his sweet old Mima always seemed to worry too much. He was 25 years old. He could go on a week-long trip alone. But the good Lord had to prove him wrong, for brushing aside advice given by his elder. Jesse was a salesman, meaning he often traveled for work to bring different items to his hometown, to sell at the shop he worked in with his family. Taking an overnight transit bus seemed like the most logical choice for transportation at the time. But you could say Jesse shot himself in the foot with that. The bus had been so crowded, even with getting off at a rest stop every few hours, the young man couldn't get comfortable after a full day and night aboard, so he had jumped at the chance to get off at the next stop. However, Jesse had made the boneheaded mistake of dozing off on the benches, and by the time he came to his senses, it was already dusk. Nobody had bothered to wake him, and probably hadn't noticed either. This was not good. His only means of transportation was gone, along with his backpack as well as his wallet, which he was naive enough to pack away instead of keeping in his pocket like a person with a lick of sense. Taking a look around, he found boxes with coin locks to buy newspapers or maps if needed, a flashlight that had been left behind, and a few quarters in his pocket. Sadly, no payphones to call a taxi or his family. That's where his luck seemed to dry up like a light rain shower in the middle of summer. It would take 2 days to get back home by foot. Still, Jesse was grateful to the few droplets he had gotten. So, all he had to do was find a payphone or hopefully someone willing to pick up a hitchhiker. Lord have mercy for whatever mistake I must have made to have such rotten luck, he prayed under his breath as he switched on the flashlight. The sun had started to dip beyond the mountains, and soon there was no longer any light, other than the full moon and the occasional light pole on his walk. Admittedly, the forest wasn't so bad at night. As much as it was scary, it had an air of mystery about it. As the full moon shone its moonbeams down and the stars twinkled overhead, one could wonder what mysteries lie beneath the dark veil of the night. What might stare back at you if you looked too deep to see past the thick veil? The only thing that kept his mind occupied enough to ignore the sounds in the woods, be it the wind in the trees or the night critters scurrying about in the shadows of the tall trees, was the effort of trying to hold the flashlight steady in his mouth as he looked at the map. looking for any indication that he was closer to home. The thought of his brother teasing and taunting him like a 3-year-old for his blender, and of course his Missy, brought him some comfort. He thought of seeing her honey blonde hair, jewel green eyes, and the warm smile when he got home. The thought of her warmed his heart better than his Mima's chicken porridge. Walking long distances wasn't exactly new to Jesse. While he wasn't anywhere near as athletic as his Uncle Joe or his brother Jim, he had enough practice and willpower to make a good distance. He was grateful for the Texas springs not being as blazing as the summers, so he had a perfectly cool night to make his journey back home, aside from the occasional gust of wind. With happy thoughts having kept him calm while walking, Jesse became slightly shaken when he heard a voice slip through the calm night. "What an odd sight," the calm, deep voice said, catching the blonde's attention, bringing him out of his thoughts. Jesse turned in the general direction of the voice, but only saw darkness. "Hello?" he replied aloud once he took the flashlight out of his mouth, for a split second wondering if he had been hearing things before hearing the voice again. "Hello," the voice parroted back as an answer. Using his flashlight to cut through the night, the bright light was shown towards the trees where he had heard the voice. The light seemed to melt away the dark background, and he was able to see a man leaned against a tree once illuminated. It was no wonder he had such a hard time seeing him, because the man was dressed mostly in black, with a wide-brimmed hat tilted over his face, blending him into the shadows. 1,000,001 questions flooded the Texan's head, but before he could ask a thing, the stranger continued. "It would seem I'm not the only one to be up and about in the forest." He heard the man chuckle, sounding amused. As he tilted his hat out of his face, the flashlight's glow lit up a pair of impossibly blue eyes that seemed to reflect the light like the moon. Jesse was slightly taken aback by this, once taking in the man's appearance. Wearing black, even in a Texas spring, was odd enough as is. Hadn't he felt like he was going to bake alive during the day? Not only that, but the stranger had skin like the bark of a redwood tree, as well as long, glossy black hair that reflected the light, as well as a rounded face with high cheekbones. To the Texan, it was obvious the man before him was of Native American descent. His appearance was similar to the few he met in many ways, all except for his eyes, in turn making Jesse all the more entranced as the man walked towards him, never breaking eye contact. For a moment, Jesse felt like a rabbit under the eyes of a predator, unable to look away. The man was tall, very tall, in fact probably a whole head taller than Jesse, causing him to crane his neck upward just to keep eye contact with the man. Maybe that was a factor to why the Texan felt so uneasy at first, as well as just being in a defensive mindset for meeting a stranger at night, with no one but them and the forest creatures around for miles. But the longer he stared, Jesse noticed that rather than predatory or threatening, those alluring eyes seemed to be more curious and playful. The Texan soon realized the man wasn't so scary in reality. He had a rather handsome face and a friendly smile. It was similar to a well-behaved dog who was happy to meet someone new. With that in mind, Jesse felt his lungs let go of the breath he hadn't noticed he had been holding. He was relieved, but he couldn't get over the color though. They were so unnatural. Still, Jesse felt drawn to the man, like a string was tugging on him, towards the other. "What are you doing all the way out here?" the man asked quizzically with a smile. And Jesse was snapped out of his trance. I got left behind while taking the bus," Jesse replied, flustered. With a quick throat clear, Jesse added his own question. "What about you? Why were y'all off to the side like that?" The man chuckled. "Just taking a quick rest. I've been walking a while, and thought near a tree would be safer. Jesse opened his mouth to ask why he was standing, how he knew he was walking by, but quickly clamped his jaw shut. I can sleep standing up, so I can be ready to move again. And I'm a light enough sleeper to have heard you approaching. The Texan took a moment to blink owlishly a few times. Oh wow, I guess that makes sense, Jesse reasoned. It was still a tad odd, but each to their own. I'm Blue, the man stated promptly, outstretching a dark hand to add to his greeting. Flinching a bit surprised, Jesse added a quick apology for some reason. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. Perhaps his marbles rolled away for a hot second, because soon the man let out a small laugh, and the blonde quickly realized his mistake. Not blue as in sad, but blue as in his name? Well, that was embarrassing, Stranded Man thought, feeling his peach skin turning what he could assume was a pretty bright pink. Wait, his name was Blue? The oddities attached to this man continued to grow. More than likely, it was just a nickname he preferred to go by, though. So again, the young man cleared his throat. I'm Jesse McCain, he greeted as he shook the man's outstretched hand, still a bit flustered. Any last name for you? And the blue-eyed man just shook his head. No, just Blue. Alrighty, nice to meet you. The blonde offered a friendly smile, and Blue returned it. Jesse quickly noticed, after realizing he hadn't pulled away his hand, that the dark hand he had shaken was adorned with long, thick claws, instead of normal nails, and for some reason, he found them interesting. So he lifted the other's hand slightly higher to get a better look. He also realized Blue's hands were calloused, but felt sort of soft like a dog's paw. And his nails were so dark, and they were so much like the thick claws dogs had too. I wondered if fake nails were becoming popular with men nowadays. But before he could ask, Blue gently but hastily withdrew his hand. Now that that is put aside, the native man said, putting his hand in his coat pockets, do you mind me asking what you're doing out here? On foot and without a backpack, no less. Jesse tried to think of a way to explain himself, and the unfortunate situation he had tripped into like a three-legged donkey. After Blue suggested that they walk while talking, it became slightly more easy to gather his thoughts and to put into proper words. The man seemed friendly and acted like he wasn't going to be headed anywhere particularly. So perhaps attempting to engage in light conversation might help a bit. Jesse felt oddly relaxed to now have a traveling partner. So, as the two walked, the blonde told the blue-eyed man about what had happened as they walked along the side of the road. And, as expected, the man chuckled a bit. Ah, that's quite the string of bad luck, he replied when the story was finished. And Blue started retelling his own tales of random misfortunes on his travels. Before either knew it, they were chatting endlessly as they walked further into the night. The young man couldn't explain it, despite having been a bit rattled by the man during the first minute of their meeting. Jesse opened up seamlessly, like they were old friends. Blue had the air of someone wise beyond his years, like he had already lived 100 of them. But while he was reluctant to talk about his origins, Jesse didn't mind. While Blue, in fact, instead seemed intrigued by the blonde stories of his home life. Now that he thought about it, Blue was like an old stray dog, who was intimidating at first, just because you didn't know if he would bite. Still, Jesse couldn't quite shake the underlying feeling that was still prickling him like a thistle. In the very back of his mind, something fell off. Well, my dear fellow travelers, there's so much more to read, but today I will stop here. Still, I hope you enjoyed the story so far, and we'll come back for the next telling of The Man with Blue Eyes. But if the story intrigues you, I will leave a link to it in a pinned comment down below. But for $2 a month on Patreon, you can listen to the story audio before it's posted on YouTube. And especially because the story is so long, I'll be trimming it into smaller parts in order to save my voice. Also, if you can't support me on Patreon, you can instead like and share this video. The little monster community is slowly growing, and I can't wait to see where it'll take me in the future. So, with all that said, be safe on your travels, and look out for the monsters under the bed, and I'll see all you jelly beans in the next video. Bye!